Miss Porter is on the STEMV team, by the way.
Nice.
Hello, Nicole.
Hi.
Hi. Such a pleasure to have you today. I don't think we formally met. My name is Lila Newton.
Hi, Lila. My name is Nicole Banks.
Very, very nice to meet you, Nicole. I've heard a little bit about your work, but we're going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit more today.
Okay, looking forward to it. I'm kind of
Where are you
multitasking here,
guys?
as you know we do.
Yeah, I can see that. Where are you?
So, right now, I'm working at the OMI Center with seniors. I'm a case manager for seniors right now.
Excellent. Excellent work.
Yeah, getting a
Excellent.
lot of information that I didn't know about before in the city that I help a lot of different people, not just the seniors.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate you. Are you going to be able to settle into a space soon? Uh-oh. Jermaine, do we want to give it a few more minutes for folks to log on?
But I personally would say no. I think one that people will be coming in if they can make it, and then two, yeah, I think after the introduction and stuff, people will be here if they can make it.
Okay. All right.
Hey.
Well, you're going to be a part of the
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Miss Lori, did you come to San Francisco before? You wasn't no. I'm like, you look familiar. I know another lady who came out and was on our Cindy truck in the community around like our community day, but you kind of look like her. I may be mistaken. I just have to ask.
Well, you got to be listening, Miss Porter. You got to be listening closely.
I get that all the time.
Yeah.
I got
I think she came from the Bronx or something, or Queens or somewhere. I don't know, but
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Doppelganger.
I do.
Crazy.
Everywhere all the time in the street.
Everywhere all the time. Okay, so you want to kick us off?
Possibly. Okay, now I'm stuck. But sure, I can kick us off. But yeah, for the folks who are just joined. Did everybody get kicked out?
Did we kick everybody out?
Let me see. Good question.
I'm still here.
Okay, great.
Cool. As long as you guys are still present, that's good. Again, I'm still struggling with this computer, but grateful for this opportunity. Again, what happened is the last cohort was ending, and we were talking amongst one another, the participants and Mr. Brookter, and we were like, man, it would be really cool if we could get anyone that helps fund different organizations and their grants and so forth to participate or to come and to speak with us. And so have been looking for those opportunities since then. The initial plan was actually for us to eat with you, Lori. Get you a little something. We could all be eating and sit at the table and get to some degree comfortable with being in the presence of someone who helps people like us, get a little bit more funding for our programs, and that people could possibly share some things about their experience, and I would even say maybe hang-ups, concerns, fears, questions about both, I would say grant writing, but also connecting with funders by any other means. And so ideally today we'll get to talk about those things, and they'll get a chance to chime in as well. So super glad that you're here. And for the folks who are here, we again want you to participate as much as you can. Even for the folks, or say maybe even for the sake of the folks who aren't here, who can't ask questions, who can't engage, if you guys can make sure to throw out your ideas, ask your questions, and engage with what the conversation is made up of, so that people who are not here currently can feel like, I was going to ask that, or I was going to bring that up myself. So yeah, thanks again, Miss Newton, for making this connection happen. And definitely looking forward to you engaging with the homie. I'm feeling all the comfort that you guys get to have with each other. You took off the glasses. I'm actually kind of not feeling, feeling away about that. But it's all right. It's all right. Still looking really nice today. But yeah, if you can take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Jermaine. I appreciate that introduction. And just to orient folks on the call, thank you so much for joining us today for Level Up. You've seen me a couple of times on this screen, and you know me as a business development maven background, which is the heart of the work that I do in community and with individual practitioners, both private and public. But we had a great session on fundraising maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And then we followed that up with a presentation from 2 of your fellow cohort participants. That's such a hard word, cohort participants. Last week and this week, an ad hoc but fantastic session with Lori Boozer. And today we are speaking about some of the barriers that are faced by BIPOC leaders of nonprofits, and drill down specifically around the gaps that are facing our Black leaders in this space and how we might navigate philanthropy. And Lori is one of those individuals on the inside, herself a grantor. And I think that Ms. Porter might have touched on something about that, but I'm going to give Lori the opportunity to introduce herself. But I'd like her to introduce herself, and then we'll popcorn it around. And my little icebreaker today is share one adjective, one word that describes how you're showing up today, and I'll be last. So, Lori, welcome. I want to give you the opportunity to share your word. And then the next question is, what do you want to get out of today's session?
So I got to answer these questions too, right? I'm going to say I'm showing up lit. I'm lit, y'all.
I love it.
And what do I want to get out of today's session? I will say my one word is community. So really just listening to and hearing from everyone about their experiences and sort of figuring out how I can be of service and be a resource to where you are in the stage of your work that you're in. A little bit about me. I think I'm supposed to also talk about myself. I don't like talking about myself, but I think Donald Trump does it, so why not? So I will confess that you did see me, Miss Porter. You met me in California. Everyone looks frozen, but you met me in California with the YCD truck. I had long extensions in my hair. It was like cold, so I had on a SEMBI hat and like a green jacket because I am the director of the Mobility Labs Initiative for Robin Hood Foundation here in New York. So I feel like I just did like a prank gotcha moment because I could have really confessed that when you said it, but I thought it was so fun to be able to say it is me. So it is me. I'm originally from Brooklyn, so I grew up in Brooklyn here in New York. I've always had a career in the public sector for as long as I can remember, and I've been really driven and committed to wanting to see transformation in community as well as in the lives of individuals who are trying to overcome their experience with poverty, which we know is pervasive in this country. A little bit about my personal background. I actually grew up in my own experience of poverty. And so I think that's a part of what makes it so particular to the work that I do, and really believing that everyone has something to offer to the world and they should be given the best resources and opportunities to be able to bring those gifts to fruition. And that when we have strong communities, we enable people to better be able to do that for themselves in a way that is reflective of who they are and not necessarily what the rest of the world tells them to be. With that, in terms of different experiences, I came to Robin Hood after working for city government here in New York in the homelessness sector. So I was working to sort of open homeless shelters and do government relations and advocacy work on behalf of the Department of Social Services here in New York, which you know is a really huge agency. Lots of conflicts around homelessness here currently with the migrant situation. And then prior to that, I spent some time as an attorney doing eviction prevention work in housing court and really working to keep tenants in their homes, which you know is a part of the dynamic of the poverty equation. I won't go on. There are lots of other little things that I've done, but really happy to talk to you all today from my experience as much as possible and hopefully help you all on your journeys. And I'll popcorn it over to Ms. Porter.
Okay. Well, first off, I knew I seen you. So I'm like, I kind of don't forget faces. I won't forget your name, but I won't forget your face. But you had me, though. I was thinking, looking at you, I'm like, no, she had to be out here. I don't know. but well, my name is Miss Porter, and I don't remember the maybe Miss Newton, you can help me. I don't remember the questions we supposed to answer.
Sure, not a problem. So, one word, one adjective, how you're showing up today. Then, what do you want to get out of this session? And just a little bit about what brings you to Level Up. So, about you and your organization.
Okay, cool. I'm feeling great. My mom's coming in from Texas today, so I haven't seen her in a very long time. So I'm super excited. I feel great. I'm kind of having everything in order, just moved, so everything's like fresh and clean right now, like a breath of fresh air. What I would like to get out of today is just information on how to the nitty and gritty of what you do, how to start a mobility lab, how just general information on the upcoming of what we do here in the community, using a vehicle, and then as far as my nonprofit, I just started I call it K-Wall. It stands for Keeps Walk of Life. And in its general, keeps mean a lot of different things to me. So that's why I named it K-Wall, and I just abbreviated it. But my goal is to bring diabetes awareness into the communities through activity, as far as like reading classes, painting classes, workouts, and also cleaning the community as a whole. I'm hoping to start a program where I can hire residents to clean their own community, and they can get all the credentials and everything they need to be successful and move forward beyond the community. Like hopefully we can like get them to not just want to work in their community, and they want to move further. Along with, and I know I'm kind of like all over the place, but this is like everything that I'm like super passionate about, and I'm trying to figure out how to put it all in one. Lastly is a mobile basketball camp, to where I could come to you at your house, to wherever, a park setting, group, and my truck actually have basketball courts on it. And I had Googled all this stuff, and like they have foldable basketball courts I can pull out. You can pull it up anywhere. And yeah, I'm still like writing out a business plan for that, and just trying to see how it looks. But those are like my ultimate goal within my organization. I'm already kind of doing that stuff now. I'm just not fully like doing it. Like I do every other Friday, I do basketball workouts with the kids. They're a bunch of 6 and 7 year olds, 8 year olds, which it goes well. We go to a gym, an open gym, and work out. So I want to do it mobily. Some parents can't take their kids to the gym or come meet me there. So I'm like, I want to come to you. And basketball is really what I'm passionate about, and I love it. It's like a happy place for me. And it's still like community wise. So I'm still like learning how to like word everything and just putting everything all together, but that's where I'm at with it. I'm a little all over the place, but it's gonna come to light soon. And that's about it. And then I guess Miss Nicole, you can go next.
Hello, Nicole. Can you hear us? Okay, Jermaine, I'm going to go ahead and popcorn it over to, oh, Nicole's there. Great. We can't hear you.
I don't know how to fix it.
You did it perfectly. It worked.
So you can hear me now? I'm scared to move. Okay. So my name is Nicole. I'm super excited. That would be how you would describe me at this moment. I want to take from this how not to get discouraged with the news that you hear about, the funds or lack thereof, to continue to reach my goals, if that makes sense. And then my program is called Selfie Made. It was a event slash selfie museum. Basically, you just come in and you take pictures of backdrops and stuff. But really, it's really about building yourself, self esteem, self value, self awareness, self improvement, self employment, anything that has to do with yourself that can help you uplift your community. That's what Selfie Made is about. So I put it on hold for a minute because all my funds were depleted, and it was really hard for me to get funds elsewhere, as like applying for grants or loans or what have you. So I had to put it on hold because life was lifing. But I still am working on. I'm still working on it, but at a slower pace than what I was before, because I was like, I was getting it. I was getting it, but it was draining me. So I had to take a step back, and re collaborate with what I was doing, and try and do it strategically. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I have a question, Jermaine. Is Tina on the line?
I do not see her. I did see her commenting.
Yes.
So she was here. And honestly, she may be here in a capacity that I just can't see from my phone right now. I'm still trying to load this on my desktop. But she may actually be able to hear us. And may need to just get into the studio. Because I actually never saw
Okay.
her.
So Tina said she's here. Can you share, Tina, as well? All right. Well, in the meantime, Jermaine, why don't you go ahead and share?
Okay, will do. So first thing that I've been dying to say since the confession that Lori had made was not only did Miss Newton know, okay, but Miss Newton was the first person to say doppelganger. So this was a team effort for her to know, for us to believe that she wasn't that lady on the Simbi, man. When the whole time, both of them, I'm sure they were talking about it like since then. Like, oh man, that was great that you came. We're so, when are you coming back? And then they're like, dude, I don't know what they're talking about. Good stuff. That was good. That was good. And so once again, I'm appreciating the humor. When I think of money, I don't think nothing's funny. So I'm glad that you got some jokes going on. But for me, one as the program manager with Level Up, for the last year, been working with folks to in the community who are doing things, trying to get things going in San Francisco in particular, and try my best to connect them with the folks who have been in their same shoes, same issues, same struggles, overcoming the same type of obstacles. And so, really, just glad to have this opportunity to give them a chance again to hear from someone who has been working with funders and knows not only what it's like to what it could be like on their end of the if you will, of the deal, but also knowing what it's like being on your end. So actually, I do want to know about what it's like, being on that side of the equation, if you will, and sharing, some of the things that you may have heard or the things that you hear regularly. That could be, the barriers that we're facing in getting funding. And so definitely willing and down to hear that perspective. And I think one of the other questions was just kind of like, how are you showing up today? I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about the information that is about to be dropped and recorded and captured and shared eventually too.
So Jermaine, you're showing up excited. Is that your adjective?
Oh, so it's a one word thing.
One word. You gave me a lot of words.
Okay. I see. Lori took lit, and lit is a good one. I'm gonna go with juiced.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay. Father to a newborn. All right. Juice. Okay. We have Tina Brown joining us as well. Good morning, Tina. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm sorry. All this time I've been backstage. I didn't realize that it was something that I needed to do on this end. My bad. Good morning. I'm showing up excited.
Good.
I'm showing up excited, and I hope to gain knowledge. My organization is My Sister's Keeper, and what I do is empower women to be their best selves. And my nonprofit side is a safe place, which eventually will turn into a transitional home for women coming from reentry. And that's what I got.
Well, fantastic. I appreciate you giving me a little bit of clarity, and that type of transitional housing is much needed. What area are you serving?
San Francisco.
Okay.
It will be San Francisco. It
will be San Francisco. It is San Francisco. Whereabouts in San Francisco? What district?
Would be the downtown market, south of Market. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's where the police station is. It's just better that way, that area.
Oh, I know the land.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you, Tina. I think we have a great group here, a group that can really appreciate the guests that we have today. Lori, I just want to dive in, and you touched a little bit on this. You've worked both in the private and public sectors, and you touched a little bit about your personal background as well as your career in both private and public. But how did you end up in philanthropy and that side of philanthropy as a grantor?
How did I end up in philanthropy? I think that's a trick question. I was working for the city. So I think part of the challenge is trying to figure out, when you're a solutions-oriented person, where is the actual solution? And when I first entered the public sector, I entered it from a place of wanting to help and believing that whatever form of service I would partake in would somehow make a dent in this very large issue of poverty. It was poverty, it's race, it's class, it's all these intersectionalities that we know about. And I quickly realized when I was practicing as an attorney that I was putting Band-Aids on a gushing wound, that there was hemorrhaging that was happening, that all I could do was keep someone from being evicted. And sometimes I couldn't even do that, depending on the circumstances, depending on the financial pieces of it, depending on, a couple of different factors that played a part in what I was able to do in housing court. And I think that was very stressful and felt very limiting. And so I sort of thought, well, there has to be a different role where there's more of an impact, more of an impact on change that you can have. And I kind of landed in my position with the government because I had run for office, and some people who had known about my campaign reached out to me, and they were looking for someone that could do government relations work with the Department of Social Services. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the government is where it's at, right? Like, the government is big, it has money, it has resources that a little small legal service provider doesn't have. Maybe there are some policy impacts and things that I can do in that space. And in that role, I think I saw more of the Band-Aid, just in a different capacity, right? There was a lot of homelessness, there was a lot of shelter building, there wasn't enough affordable housing. And again, it felt like all you could do was shuffle the pieces around and try to stem the bleeding, but you couldn't really stop it. And I think I was still searching for the sort of, well, where else can you go where there's a bit more power, perhaps? There's a bit more of an ability to drive conversation towards a systemic change. And I had always known about the Robin Hood Foundation because I worked in organizations that got money from them. I ended up just applying for a position there and getting the job. And with the belief that having access to capital and being able to direct that capital and to support programs that were being built in community to really make change, that perhaps there would be a greater impact there. So that's how I ended up in the role. I hope that is answering your question.
It absolutely answers my question. You touched upon public policy. I know that you have a law degree, and you've used it. I think you've used it in many ways, and you've used it in the boardroom on behalf of BIPOC and Black-led nonprofits. So I'd like to thank you for that, and just kind of talk about a little bit about the work that you're currently doing that is actually on a national level on behalf of Robin Hood Foundation.
Yeah, so I think it's really exciting work. I started out as a senior program officer. I'm now the director of what is a $25 million investment across several different funding partners to really support community-driven solutions that address poverty across 9 communities here in the United States. So we have 3 in New York, 3 out west, Ms. Porter, which you are in one of them in the Bayview, 1 in Harvey, Illinois, 1 in Northeast Pennsylvania, and 1 in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's a good look at sort of this rural, urban, a little bit of suburban dynamic in terms of understanding the challenges of economic mobility and really emphasizing the role that community plays in shaping a vision for itself. How do they steward resources? Where do they prioritize the need for those resources, and what types of solutions do they ultimately come up with? How do we as a funder support those solutions and really build strong partnerships with organizations that are doing the work?
I think that's really interesting. What I'm hearing is that it is, in essence, community-driven solutions to the issues of disparity, specifically poverty, and how they can mobilize out of it. Are you seeing any kind of similarities or trends that are running across the country that either we can learn or we can at least feel solidarity with?
Yeah, I think preliminarily, and I think we hope to have some more in-depth capturing of learnings over the next years. It's the final year of the initiative, which was a 4-year investment. But I think initially, some of the biggest takeaways are really in what it means to listen to community and be responsive to what they need and sort of the direction that they have, and understanding that it may not look like what you're used to seeing or what you prefer to see, particularly as a funder when we have certain standards and expectations and metrics that we are holding people accountable for. And also that community is really interested in thinking about the long-term transformation. So there's often this intentional disinvestment in many of these communities, and there are other sort of political factors and social factors that play a role in how a community is shaped over time, but that there should be the same level of intentionality in trying to address the challenges that community faces. And that may not look like a one-off program. It may look like a community saying, well, we want to be able to be a container for the resources that we didn't have previously or prior to this investment, and use this investment as an opportunity to bring in more of those resources and to be able to say that we can steward that, not necessarily that it's one particular organization, but that they're working collectively to create an infrastructure that allows for that to happen.
That's certainly a shift of dynamic and not the usual relationship that philanthropy has with organizations, the community that they serve. It's almost like removing the middleman, and really creating a pipeline where funders can learn directly from the community and raise up those voices as the central driver to the work or the solution that's going to be created. So that's really interesting. How long is the Mobility Labs Learning Action Bets, I should say, how long is this initiative running for?
4 years. So we obviously had COVID. Lorona was in the house and she ran all through it and left her mark. And, I think as with many things, there was a shift in momentum and progress with each of the partners. I mean, people literally died. People lost staff members and lives were changed for at least 2 years of a 4-year initiative. And so, next year is the last year. I think it's going a bit beyond the actual 4 years it was intended, but it was slated to be 4 years.
Well, congratulations on the work and the continual learnings. I think this is a first for the Robin Hood Foundation to do something on a national level. And I know that YCD has been blessed by its participation and exposure, as well as the collaborators in the cohort. That's such a hard word for me, much like Level Up and the convenings that you've created, which I have to say personally are pretty dynamic. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts of the reason why we're talking today. There's a deep disparity in access to funding for BIPOC-led nonprofits, even more so for Black-led nonprofits. What advice do you have for those leaders who seek to break down the barriers to access to funding? That's a big one, I know. It's a big question. Not holding back any punches, but how would you go about it?
So I think one of the statistics that I've seen is within the nonprofit sector, there's roughly 10% of the organizations being led by BIPOC leaders and roughly 4% of those people receiving funding to do the work. And I think it's important to acknowledge and be aware that obviously these disparities are disparities that mimic what we see across the board for leaders of color in different sectors. We know that there's typically a challenge with hiring leaders of color. We know that there's typically a challenge with retaining leaders of color. We know that there's a challenge with personal things like getting mortgages and the way credit is used and all sorts of things that, because of the systems that were built and created in the country, we sort of see the ramifications of that. And I think it's not any different in terms of what we see in the philanthropic sector as we think about who gets the funding. So in terms of advice, and I feel like obviously this is going to be, hopefully there'll be a lot of questions around this. I think there are a couple of things that are really important. It's the first one I'll say is maintaining a strong belief in your vision and your own capability. And the reason why I'm going to start with that one is because the quickest thing that I think will take someone out of the game is yourself. And so you have to hold fast to what the idea is of what you're trying to do, why it's important, what the critical need is for it, because those are the things that will keep you hitting the pavement when you're being rejected or told no. And oftentimes those no's may not be because what you have isn't good, but there are different factors that different foundations may be considering or looking at that make it not a viable option to fund you. And so you have to have that belief in order to keep going. I remember before the pandemic, a young woman who I won't mention her name had like a fledgling nonprofit organization, and she was telling me as a Black woman how hard it was for her to get funding, and she wanted to give up. And I was just like, you don't give up because your vision, it doesn't seem like it, but your vision will attract the right people. You will be seen, you will get the funding. And I'm always warned when we connect, and she reminds me every single conversation of that moment for her when I gave her that advice, because it ultimately turned out to be true, that her foundation, her organization is thriving, that she is getting funding. She works with youth, that the work is being heard and seen. And so I think that that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is invest in your own growth and development, and be very honest about what your limitations are with what you know. And so we often have these ideas, and we think because we think it's great, everyone's going to believe us and think it's great or see it automatically. And maybe we don't know how to communicate our idea effectively. Maybe we are not the best presenters. Maybe we don't know how to manage finances. Maybe there are other things that feel like a challenge that are out of our wheelhouse, but we are the visionary and we hold the vision for the work that we want to do. And so thinking about the ways that you can invest in yourself or find others to invest in you. So for example, at Robinhood, we have something called the Power Fund for leaders of color in New York, where we sort of take in this cohort of leaders in and are investing in their growth and development as leaders of nonprofits. And so programs like this, really being a part of these spaces so that you can continue to learn and to grow, because you want to be able to demonstrate not just on paper, but just with your confidence, that you have an understanding of what it takes and that you feel confident in being able to do everything to steward the resources that you're asking for. And then I'd say the third thing is building relationships and always remembering to, every time you connect with someone, it may not be dollars that you're getting, it may be another connection. You're getting different things from different people. You always want to ask people that you speak with, who is someone else that I should speak with? And look for the guidance and the mentorship, not just the dollars, but that you're building a network of people that can help you move your vision forward. I think that those are sort of three critical things. And then there's some practical things like having your nonprofit house in order. Foundations look for different things. As a funder, we do financial due diligence. We are looking at whatever dollars you do have and how you're spending them. We're looking at your leadership. We're looking at the profile of your nonprofit. We're looking at the impact that you're having if you've done some of the work already. So being able to be a great storyteller for yourself in all of those things, I think is also important. So I'd say those are I'll say 4 things to start with.
I counted 5.
Okay, 5.
I did. And so to recap, do not compromise your vision, invest in your own growth. Number 3 is building relationships. Number 4 is get your nonprofit house in order. And number 5 is storytelling, being able to convey what you've proven and established is the need, and that you're the best person to address that need. And we've talked about that many times, Lori, in this work. So I just want to drill down a little bit further. This cohort is made up of very small nonprofits. And you talked about relationship building, investing in yourself, getting your stuff in order. But how do we survive a competitive environment or a pandemic for that matter? The ups and downs of, the marketplace, environmental catastrophes. There's a lot going on while trying to serve the community. How can we survive in this competitive market? Where should we go? Where can we go?
I think it's interesting. I think, and this may sound, I don't know how this will be received, but I think those things are always going to be present. I'm now hearing Billy Joel sing, "We didn't start the fire," right? Like it was always burning before the world was turning. There will always be a thing, and I think that's true for life writ large. And the challenge is always how we meet the moment and how we respond to the thing. So start from a place of there will always be a thing. And if you do the other five things, and if you keep yourself aware of the fact that there will be some challenge that comes your way, right? I think what you don't want is to be caught off guard. You don't want to kind of skip through like, everything's great, and then suddenly it's like poof, and you don't know what to do, right? You want to sort of, it's like having an emergency fund. You want to think critically about what you're doing and to also plan a little bit of resilience into your work for the challenges and the obstacles that you might face, and then kind of put that down, because I don't think it will serve you from a creationist point of view to be stuck in survival mode around the vision for your work. So you have to be able to put that down and shift yourself into a line of thinking that says that there is abundance and that there's enough funding. Even if the narratives in the world are saying that there isn't, we know that there are billions of dollars alone in the United States, right? And so reminding yourself that even if it's taking some time, there's more than enough resources to go around. Because if you get stuck in the place of it's competitive, there isn't enough, no one's going to give me the money, then you will stay in that space. Build up your resilience for the challenges that will come, and then focus on who is getting funding. How are they getting the funding? Who are they talking to? How much money are people really giving? What programs look like my pro? Because there's no such thing as a brand new idea. What programs are similar to mine that are thriving? How do I tap into those people as resources? And really focus on the overall vision for what you're trying to do and not what you don't have. Because you don't want to get stuck in that space. Like if I stopped and was like, it's a famine, it's a COVID, I would never leave my house, and I don't think I'd be successful. And I think we go back and forth into those states as people, and that's natural. But to constantly bring yourself back to this space of what's my vision, where am I going? I believe that this is possible, and like here are the examples in front of me that remind me that that is true.
I really appreciate you touching on those points. It's almost a call to action, getting outside of the servicing and really putting on that hat of being the ambassador for the work and the need, and establishing partnerships with not only relationships with potential funders, but also with the people that are aligned with the work that you do. It might be in a different city, it might be in a different area of San Francisco, it might be in New York. And I think that is powerful. I appreciate that answer. I've heard very often within this cohort and amongst other leaders of color that they are not comfortable asking for money. And I've reframed it as an investment. But I'd like I'd like you to tell us how one might get over the fact that we have to do that. And second of all, a little bit about your role when you receive, a great opportunity, you see a great opportunity to invest. How do you then advocate? And what does that look like for you being in those spaces and collaborating with nonprofits that are led by people of color?
I may need you to restate that second question. So
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go
I
with the
think
first
that was
one.
a little awkward. I was stacking the questions. Shouldn't do that. Post 101.
No. I just can't remember. I won't be able to remember
Okay.
all the questions at
I'll
once.
remember it.
The first question was, how do you order a Happy Meal? See, I'm already done.
No, that's all right.
The first question was,
No, I didn't make it simple. So how do we get over the fact that we have to
you don't want to answer
the
me.
stigma? The
Listen,
stigma. Yeah.
here's what I'm going to say as a Black person, Black woman. We have to acknowledge the fact that we have a script and a program playing in our minds that has told us that we are a burden to this country, that we don't work, that we only get handouts, all of the things that any self-respecting person would say, well, I don't need any of that. I don't need your money, and I'm going to do the thing on my own. We have to be real about the narratives that play a role in how we think about our existence in the world. I say that to say that none of that is true, and asking for money is really, really hard. It's really hard, especially if you grow up with those stories, and there's a perspective around how we think people see Black people, in particular, or people of color doing this work. But we have to get over the hump, and we have to recognize that those narratives are not true. We obviously know they're not true, and the only way the work gets done is to ask for money. And people who don't look like us are asking for money all the time, for random things, for ideas that don't make sense, for lack of capability. Donald Trump is out here asking for money. Some people don't think he should be president, but people are giving him money, right? And so it goes back to the first point that I made about the self-belief, and also just sort of the worth in your idea, and that it's enough. You're enough. You're asking for money is not about a validation in any way. It's about doing the work, and you believe in the work, and the reality is that you can't do it without the help of other people or the help of other people's investments. And so I would say practice your little pitch when you're presented with a conversation and you have an opportunity to make an ask. You have to understand, what is it that I'm asking for? Why am I asking for it? Who's my audience when I'm asking? And it may not be a room full of people. It could just be a one-on-one conversation. But if the opportunity presents itself, you will have practiced in a mirror how you're going to ask for $5,000, because maybe that's what you need in order to get all your paperwork set up and start, launching your whatever your idea is. And do it until you feel comfortable with it, and then practice feeling the feeling of being told that you won't get that investment. Because rejection is also another piece of it. And so when we get rejected repeatedly, we start to revisit those internalized narratives that bring us back to the space where we're uncomfortable with asking for money. And it's like anything else where you have to put yourself out there. So practice the ask, know what it is you're asking for. Know who's giving it. So if a foundation is only known to give to criminal justice reform, and they only give $100,000 a year, and that's the totality of their budget, do not show up and say, I'm selling cookies for homelessness and I need $250,000 to start. Rejected off the bat because it doesn't even align with that funder, and it's not even within the range of their giving. And so do the research as a part of knowing what to ask. So getting comfortable with asking, practice the ask, knowing what you're asking for, knowing who you're asking it to. And then the second half of that is being comfortable with the rejection and practicing that feeling, and deciding that rejection isn't going to be the totality of your experience, because you'll have to keep asking. You have to keep pushing past it.
I don't want to restate the second question just yet. I kind of want to stay in this place, Lori. I think that you have raised some really good points and some great advice. So you mentioned foundations. Where should I go for funding?
Well, that is nuanced depending on what you want your funding for. And then I think also just understanding that there are some differences. All foundations are not the same. And this is still something that I've learned over time and I'm constantly learning more about. They're not all the same, right? We think of philanthropy as homogenous, and it's not. It's a diverse group of different types of people. So you have individual donors, you have family philanthropies, which may be very wealthy families that are in the process of forming or have formed foundations to steward the wealth that they've generated towards good causes. A lot of times, what they stewarded towards are personal causes that they've decided that they want to invest in. So they may want to invest in saving the elephants. They may want to invest in homelessness, but they have created a mission around what they believe the purpose of their foundation is. You have intermediary foundations like a Robin Hood, where we don't have an endowment, meaning we don't at this time have a pot of money that we just grow over time, kind of the way a college or a university would. But we raise every dollar that we give, and we raise it from individuals or other foundations because they trust us, given a methodology that we use to decide who to give money to be able to give that money responsibly. They don't want the responsibility necessarily of doing it themselves, or they like our ideas or programs that we've invested in. And then you have some foundations that have been here for a while. They have endowments, and they have a core set of programs that they may use that money for. They're not necessarily hard on the pavement raising additional dollars. And within all of that, you're looking at the programmatic interests of the different foundations, the values of those foundations, and whether or not they align with your programs that you want to build, as well as your values as a provider. And that takes a lot of research. It's like any other business. Just because it's a nonprofit doesn't make it less research intensive than a for-profit, right? When you launch a for-profit, you need a business plan, you have to do market research and do all these things just to go sell tea leaves to somebody. So I would say the flip side of that is the same way you'd look for investors for that business, you're applying some similar strategies in identifying investors for your nonprofit. And you have to know these different players, what they do, what they stand for, what they give money for, and also what their requirements are. And are you meeting those requirements? And different funders will have different requirements. And that's something I think that can be a bit of a mystery. And so that's where building relationships and talking to people who've gone through processes. Maybe they've gotten funding from a funder you want to get funding from. They can help you gain insights into, here's what this funder asks when you're writing a grant. Here's what they're looking for. They're really big on financial due diligence or programmatic impact or for certain things that they want to see for a new organization. Maybe they want to see fiscal sponsorship. Maybe you're too small. We have that in Mobility Labs, where we have one organization that we believe that the community believes is the best long-term steward, but was not capable in the beginning of receiving direct payment from us. They wouldn't have passed a due diligence check with their finances and some other things. And so a different organization came in as the lead, and they agreed to both help this organization develop, but also be the conduit of the dollars to the organization as they grow into their role as the lead provider for that community. And so looking for those opportunities is also, I think, a part of it.
Thank you, Lori. What are your thoughts? You did talk about, and the reason why I'm asking the next question is we have a nearly $800 billion yearly philanthropic pot in the United States, where people are giving their dollars to anything and everything from religion to the environment. And a large part of that, the largest actually segment of that are individuals. But another area is the government, local, city, federal. I would like to hear your thoughts about seeking funding from the city, knowing what you know about the city and the work that you I saw eyes.
You know, it can be a blessing and it can be a curse. I think sometimes government is good at wanting to support MWBE owned enterprises. They have their own set of requirements. It may be a good entry point for certain things. And if you are able to get initial funding from a government agency for your work, or at some point to get that funding, I think that's great. I would advise that you really understand the landscape of within your particular state, how governments and how different agencies pay on those grants. Do they pay timely? Sort of what are the challenges that organizations have faced? It doesn't mean you don't apply or go after the money, because that may be the best option for you. But you have to understand what the limitations are with that, because something we see quite often is government contracts being delayed in their payment. And so if your organization is not fiscally strong enough to withstand a delay in payment from a government agency, you have to have diversity in terms of your investment streams and sort of where other dollars are coming from. Mixing philanthropic dollars with that so that you're not solely dependent on government contracts in a way that puts you at a detriment. You can't make payroll, or your program is suffering because they're taking 6, 8, 12 months to pay out some of those dollars to you. And so I think that's the trick with government is making sure that you can manage that. It's kind of like if you were a landlord and you bought a multifamily property and then you didn't consider the fact of you being able to pay the mortgage without a tenant. So you get a really crappy tenant, and then you're dependent on that tenant to help you make the mortgage, and lo and behold, they don't pay. And you could never afford to pay that mortgage on your own. So now you're stuck with the possibility of losing your home because you have a tenant, you have to get out of an apartment, they're not paying you rent, and you can't afford the mortgage, right? So it's that type of catch-22 that you don't want to find yourself in. If I'm going to take money from government contracts, then I also need to be vehemently looking for other types of funding, because I don't want to be stuck in a situation where these payments are delayed and I'm not able to do the things that I need to do for my organization. It's a really terrible place to be. We see it a lot in New York City, and Robin Hood has done some advocacy work with our policy team around those issues.
Thank you, Lori. I really appreciate you elaborating kind of on the double-edged nature of engaging, and as well as the ways that some contracts reimburse after the fact. Um, and so that has to be carefully thought. So the question that I was stacking was really about your experience. There was a recent article in the Chronicle of Philanthropy about the lack of diversity within philanthropy on the grantor side, and especially on in the executive level. And you are an executive, and you are at I would say, a premier level nonprofit, definitely known nationally as well as internationally. What is your experience like as a Black woman, as a leader in those places and spaces? That's a loaded question, and I know that.
I think as a Black woman in any space that is predominantly not minority and especially not Black, there are challenging moments, more than what I would like to deal with or acknowledge. I think, philanthropy, and I'm gonna say this from a place of, I'm gonna be completely honest in the response to this. I think when you are in spaces where the work is about doing good work for people or on behalf of people who we perceive to be at a disadvantage, there's something hypnotic about that allows you, if you're not of color, if you haven't had any of those experiences, to feel safe from your own perceptions around the reasons why we need this work in the first place. It creates this weird insulation of, well, if I'm doing good, so I'm not that person. I'm the woke person. I am the do good person. I'm trying to solve the problem and all those things. And I think it can become challenging when you want to take up space, and some of the space that I may have to take up is to say, well, how you think you're doing good is actually not helpful, or challenging some of the beliefs and perceptions around what people in communities of color.
Lori, can you state that? You broke up for a little bit.
Yeah, I think we froze a little bit. I was just saying that I think for me, it's a lot about showing up in a space as a Black person and having to say, it's great that we're doing good, but how we're doing good may not necessarily be in the best interest of people who look like me. And I'm doing it in a space where people want to feel good, because when you're not a person of color, when you're white in a society where you don't want to be labeled a racist, or you don't want to be a person who's a part of these oppressive systems, it feels good to be in a room where you are told that what you're doing is good. And I think it can be hard to hear challenges to that. And when you don't have a critical mass of people who look like me in the spaces, we may not necessarily be the strongest voices, even though we are trying to advocate for changes in the way that we think about community and what's most useful for community. And I think it can take time for people to come around to being on board with new ideas that aren't their ideas per se, not the way that they might want to do good. And I think it's more challenging because it's money, right? And so when a person has money, you feel like, I should be able to control and dictate how my money essentially gets used. And that's a whole other sort of can of worms that we probably don't get into in this conversation. But I think it can be really hard to advocate for certain approaches when you're asking someone to basically give their money, the money that they feel that they've earned, or the money that belongs to a certain foundation in a certain way. And I think that can be really tricky. If I have $1 million and I want to buy alligator Crocs for everyone, and you're telling me no, people need book bags, it's my money. I think you need Crocs. You can't force me to not do what I think is best. And I think we see a lot of that within philanthropy, and some of it is rooted in Jermaine laughed. Some of it is rooted in privilege and lack of awareness, people not really understanding the challenges. And I mean, I think a good example of this is like the backlash that Oprah and The Rock got in Maui. I mean, they're obviously not white, but they're wealthy individuals, right? And so we can look at it not just from a race, but also from just a privilege and a class perspective. But I think it all gets tricky, right? Because what community needs and what you do from a place of privilege when you don't fully understand what's happening can be disjointed.
I just want to say thank you for your advocacy. I can only imagine that it is pretty lonely. And then having at times the burden of being a spokesperson and evolving out of that and saying, listen, you need to do your due diligence as well as funders about the need. And I think that that is why you're such a perfect champion for the mobility labs, because it takes philanthropy and it really challenges it by saying philanthropy does not have the answers. So we need to be a little bit more humble in the work and less beholden to this power dynamic that has always existed in philanthropy. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I'm excited regarding the narrative change work that you're doing. Can you just say a little bit about that? And then I want to open it up to questions, because I'm sure that we have some good questions in the audience.
Yeah, I want to have all the questions. I'll be brief. Narrative change. And I am someone who I like to separate narrative change from storytelling. I think storytelling is a component of narrative change. I don't think that just putting people up and saying, tell your story is a narrative change, because it relies too much on people's interpretation of the story and their own ability to conceive a new narrative. I think that for us, narrative change is really about looking at the broken narratives around poverty and being very intentional about what it is we actually want people to say, what we want to put out in the world about how we think about poverty, still leaving some room for people's interpretations of that, but not just, from a place of, well, here are all the stories about people and how well they're doing despite living in poverty. I think it's more, how do we take a context, a historical context, something that has impacted community, and really talk about it in an authentic way? How do we educate people's understanding about that impact on community, and how do we reimagine what community can look like? And then what are the narratives, the policy changes and systems changes that we need in order to sort of shift our beliefs into a space that demonstrate that new community, that transformation is possible. So for us, we're looking at the context of redlining for certain communities. We just got a ton of research back from one of our consultants on the 9 communities, and kind of thinking about, given the diverse nature of what we have Asian, we have white, we have Black, we have Latinx, thinking about the communities that people live in, and how did those communities come to be what they are, and what would it take to shift that dynamic? Not that it's just this individual pursuit of the American dream, but that communities themselves are thriving and offering spaces for people to live and coexist in ways that are not about having to leave their community or being pushed out of their communities. And so that's kind of where we are with narrative change. It's fresh off the electric stove, So it's still, being cooked, but hope to have more on that soon and more conversations about that soon as well.
That's incredible, Lori. Where do you think we can find updates regarding that work?
From me,
And
uh, I'm happy to share updates back with this group. I'm also happy to share my information, and anyone can reach out to me if they have any questions after this time today.
wow, that's very generous. Lori, I know I asked a lot of questions. We didn't hit necessarily on all the questions that I shared with you. Is there anything else you would like to add? What you'd like, I don't know, additional words, something we didn't cover?
Something we didn't cover. Yes, I would say it's extremely important to prioritize your well being on your journey, because the burnout rate for us is extraordinarily high. I just was in a meeting in community last week, and I just remember thinking to myself, what can I do just to like hold space for people to talk and like connect and feel supported and cared for, because you can see the fatigue in people's faces, especially when you are doing work in communities that have been so disinvested in for so long and people look like you. It's a psychological toll, it's a physical toll, it's an emotional toll. And I think it's critical to prioritize your well-being within the process, right? Like you can't kill yourself for your vision. You have to kind of be able to take care of your needs along the way. So I think that if there was something that I could add, it's not neglecting yourself in that process.
Thank you. And I receive that completely. And I hope that that was heard by our cohort. We appreciate Lori. Let's open it up for questions. Jermaine, Naya, if you can change the look of our screen so we see who's online, that would be great. And I'm just going to be calling out on people. That was a great conversation, Lori, and I really appreciate. But I know that we have some questions. I'm going to call out to Miss Porter, since now you've connected the dots, and we've talked a little bit about mobility labs. I hope that you can unmute and ask a question.
I have a question while you're waiting on Miss Porter. This
Thank
is
you.
Miss Thibodeau.
Hello, Miss Thibodeau. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Well, I actually have a statement. I thought it was one key fact in even before asking for money is having your financial house in order and your nonprofit in order. Just over the last 12 months, myself included, all of the small technicality. It's more than just filing your 990s and um, updating your board, like so many small technicalities. And when you read a lot of the books around your nonprofit, they don't even tell you the small technicalities that can have you with the attorney general's office and how to clean these messes up and what your annual requirements are. We tend to focus on 199s and 990s, but Secretary of State, the statement of interest, all of those things, even before going to ask for money, because as soon as you ask for money, the first thing they gonna look you up on GuideStar or one of the um, nonprofit boarding, and then they want a copy of your financials. And my second statement was, you talked about asking for money, and when you said like do your ask for 5,000, there is a different ask for 50,000, let alone 500,000. And I think that that's a good place to start, because when you were saying 5,000, I was over here. How about the 500,000? Um, you gotta, like you said, know what you're asking and some way to illustrate your vision. But great conversation. And thank you. Welcome back, Jermaine.
Ms. Thibodeau, while we have you online, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Yes, I'm the executive director of a senior serving organization that focuses on nutrition, recreation, and wellness for older adults who are 60 and over and adults living with disabilities. I work for a nonprofit that's been around for almost 40 plus years in the Lakeview OMI community, but has its fair share of underperformance, non-compliance, and turnover over the years. And when I joined the agency, they did not tell me where the dead bodies were buried, but I soon learned as I began to do some of the things that Miss Lori mentioned, which is apply for grants. And people were like, hey, you not eligible for a grant with us because you didn't turn in your closeout report. And they were speaking to me, and my thoughts were, I wasn't here. I didn't know about it. And so I've long learned about reviving the nonprofit and coming into compliance with all the different regulators. And in all of my nonprofit classes, some of the things that I had to revive and fix, I had never even heard of before, because the times have changed and post COVID and the timelines and things like that. But nonetheless, we've survived and we're here. Today, actually, this week, we moved into a new location. So we just expanded our services, which is why I said 5,000. I'm looking for 500,000 to help us get on a road to expanding our services in the same district, but a different neighborhood. And I appreciate this conversation most importantly. But it's been some great topics over the course of this cohort. So
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you for giving us context.
I just wanted to say I was surprised when you said some people are scared to ask for money, because they're like, I'm not.
Well, your peers are, and I appreciate that you're not. And I like that, you know, again, 5,000 is just an analogy. We have, we're all in this level up at different levels, right? And we come to this work in different levels. And I might ask on behalf of YCD, 1 million. As a matter of fact, I asked for 3 million from the Robin Hood Foundation, and we received it over a number of years for this MV initiative. But I do appreciate that you stand in your authority in this work. And I think that there's a part of Lori's message that is about sometimes this feeling of, we talked about it earlier today, imposter syndrome.
Rejection and
Yeah, but
all
also
the things of
imposter
the past.
system. Yeah, the syndrome of, am I the right person to be asking in this place? And Lori, I wanted you to maybe share a couple words on that.
Yeah, I wanted to. So, thank you to Miss Felicia. I hope I'm saying it correctly. I think when I tossed out the number 5,000, it was, I think my understanding was at the time, whoever was in the audience, there were a lot of people who were just starting. So it's kind of a random number. And I think that the key is, depending on where you are in your organization, if you're more advanced and evolved, you're asking for larger amounts, and you probably have a process and a bit more confidence with being able to do that. And I think the question really is one where people can feel hindered no matter what the dollar amount is. I work in the sector, and I'll be honest. If I have to ask for $5 million, I don't know that I'm just showing up like give me your 5 million. It takes some prep work. And to your point, Miss Felicia, you have to have your T's crossed and your I's dotted. And I think when I was referencing the sort of financial due diligence that we do, it is exactly what she's saying, right? We are looking at these very particular things in different statements, and we're talking to other funders. We're asked. It's like getting references. We may not even say give us references. Sometimes we just know people who know you, and we're trying to get a sense of how has this person been with their reporting, with their stewardship of the resources. And so I think as a person of color, we think about the context in which we have to ask for so many things in so many different spaces, and we are confronted with these biases and judgments. The same thing is true for the space that this space is, right? We're asking for money. It's like having a credit check. And the biases that we might hold against a Black person walking into a bank may not be any different than when we're sitting in front of someone and asking for $1 million to do this work. And so kind of girding yourself and understanding that you have to think beyond those limitations, because those limitations are being put on us, right? They're not actually accurate or true of who we are and what we represent in the work that we do. And I just responding to add to what you said, Lila, but there's this drop in the chat. Someone said, want to go back to the topic of resilience. What personal everyday practices have you taken to stop being in a stuck mindset? And I know that you stop. I think you have periods of ebb and flow where you're flowing. You're like, yeah, I got this. And then something hits you and you're like, oh, I don't got this for, a little bit of time. And I think for me, it always comes back to what I said in the sort of 5-point list, which is going back to the original vision and the why, because that's always going to be the starting point. And so when Miss Felicia's asking for the 5 million, and if she's ever feeling like, oh, I'm not having a lot of traction, maybe this isn't a good idea, it's nope, go back to the original why. I need to expand to a different space because we are serving this many people and we are seeing this success, and there's a relevance to what we're doing. And how do I reframe my thinking to align or to realign with what that original vision was so that I can push past the stuck place? I think it also goes back to my point about kind of the self-care and the taking care of yourself. If we are operating on empty in this process, I think we're more likely to find ourselves stuck, because it means that we've allowed some part of our needs to be depleted or unmet, and we're running into a wall within that process. And so I think you have to constantly check in with yourself with just how are you doing? How are you feeling? How is your health? How is your mental health? What thoughts are you thinking? All those things, those woo-woo things that we read, those things are actually, they play a role in our lives, and they show up in the most insidious of ways when we least expect it. And so I think for resilience, it's cultivating this sort of flexibility of mind muscle to say stuck doesn't mean permanent. And for every limiting thought that I have, what's the counteracting thought to that? If I'm feeling like I'm going to be rejected and I can't get money, what's the counteracting thought? There's an abundance of resources available to me. I, have the capacity to ask for X dollars. I've seen success in my program, and doing it until you exhaust it, because this is not easy work. Building a nonprofit is not easy work. It is a grind. And I've worked in the nonprofit sector probably since I feel like as a kid. Like I wasn't even getting paid, but grandma dragged you to the tenant association meetings. You working in the nonprofit sector, right? Right? Like there is something about the service-oriented nature of what we do that is a lot to take on. And people who have power through money don't necessarily have the appreciation of what that is. They're looking at those specific things, the dollars, the cents, the metrics, the board composition, capacity, ability. existing resources. They're looking at those things. They don't care if you're burning out because your community is suffering. That's the last thought. They worried about, are you going to waste my money? Are you going to waste my money? My money. What are you going to do with it? And I need to trust you with it. And the way I'm going to be able to trust you with it is all of these things.
So show up authentically.
You got to show up authentically. Now, it's scary. I think especially for us as Black women, I think we get a lot of, again, limitations and negative connotations put on us in spaces. But I have found that there's no other way to be other than who you are. And I was saying this to Lila earlier about the imposter. I'm going to share my imposter syndrome conversation. I was telling her I have this like side project where always got a side project because we always got a side project. I got 10 of them because I'm Aries and we can't focus worth of nothing. So I got 10 side projects and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this because it didn't feel like me and I felt like it wasn't going to work. It was inauthentic, but it's what the world was saying people wanted to see. And it just wasn't me. And I was reading this book called The Greatness Mindset, I think, by Lewis Howes, and I forget who he quotes. And he was talking about imposter syndrome, and it said something like, imposter syndrome isn't how we think about it, which is, I'm trying to do something and I feel like I'm not enough because I don't think I can do the thing. It's actually, the imposter is that you're doing something that isn't who you are. You're doing it in a way that isn't reflective of who you are. And so you have to actually show up and do the thing from the place of who you actually are. The imposter is you trying to just be someone else. It's not just, I'm not capable. Well, maybe you are not capable of, selling malt liquor because you're really a red wine kind of girl. And you're trying to sell this product because someone told you that this was a thing that was going to sell, it was going to make money, it was the way to go, but it's just not you. And your imposter kicks in when you're trying to sell the product because guess what? You can't sell something that isn't you. And so you got to figure out for yourself, well, they're telling me red wine isn't going to sell, but that's me right there. And so I'm going to find a way to show up as myself, to sell the thing that is reflective of who I am, and to trust that the vision and the process will lead me to success, right? Like that's the difference between living in your imposter and living authentically. And it just completely changed my own perspective on showing up. It's like anytime I feel that like, I'm not able to do it, I realize, it's because I'm trying to show up differently. I'm trying to show up and take up less space. I'm trying to show up more muted. I'm trying to show up in ways that just are not me. And I'm feeling like an imposter because I'm trying to be something that I'm not. But the minute I just show up, that feeling goes away. And it's not my job to convince the world to receive me. Those who receive it, and those who can't won't. And that's the way that it is.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that. I feel like there's a through line from your why and your power center to the funding relationship that you cultivate. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you here today is really also emphasize that partnership and demystify fundraising and philanthropy in parts. We're all human beings. We all breathe the same air. We might have different perspectives and different lived experiences that bring us to the work, but we're here. And there is some agreement that we want to improve things. So when you start from that premise, I think there's a lot more that bridges the disparity gap as we look at it, and really thinking about things in this perspective, which I love that you raise, in abundance versus scarcity. because with scarcity, there's fear, there's trepidation, there's shame, it's so much layered on. And as people of color, as women, Black women in this work, there's no time for that. There's no time for that to be absorbed when you're trying to do such like God's work, to be quite frank, and address the gaps that have been, not addressed by our government. But I'm getting off my soapbox. Alkeisha, I don't know if you're back, but we really want to give you an opportunity to ask a question. Now you know who Lori Boozer is. Okay.
Or Tina.
Tina. Hello.
Hi. Hi. First of all, I want to say this was a really good conversation. Really good conversation. I truly enjoyed it. Thank you both. I'm a person. I work for the government. I work for the Housing and the Homeless program in San Francisco. So I see. From my lens, I'm an employee, and then I would like to get my own nonprofit started and going. And what I've learned, this is what I saw, that connections, a lot of it is who you know. I mean, that will get you through the door to the funding, that will spread the word to the next person, the next person. And so if a person like me, per se, straight off the street, I have the live experience for the homeless department, for the homelessness programs and stuff that I want to start. Because if I don't have a connection, it's still really hard to get my foot in the door. And we're not talking just money. Okay, if you can't give me $1 million, can you pay for a 10-year lease on a building? Can you give me 100 beds? Can you provide me with the essentials that I need to run the program? Therefore, there's no money exchanged, but you could see how I could build my program. The program is being built, and then that would bring the trust level if you don't trust me, because I am new to the game, per se. So, I mean, there's other ways that that I've tried to get assistance, but because it's not relationship based, from what I've experienced, it's an automatically no. And how does a person from the ground up get him, get started? And then you look at, like, I've put all my money into my sister's keeper. So my credit score is a 600 because I've depleted all my credit cards, gave all my money to do my programs because I felt it was needed in my community. So it's like a catch-22 situation. But again, and then the other question is, Lori, do you do mentoring? Do you mentor people? Do you take on people and mentor them for someone that doesn't have all that background?
I do whatever the universe calls me to do, because I just think you got to pour everything out before you die. So if someone asks me for that, then I try to, if it fits within what I'm capable of doing with my time, then I try to do it. I think doing this was, a part of that. Sort of, if I was asked, okay, great, how can I get, and I watch the struggle, right? Like I see what people go through in the process of trying to get these dollars. So I'll say, to the first point about the relationships, everything, right? That's literally everything. And I think so often we pour a lot of our personal resources into things because we do believe in the vision. And it just takes, I think, the persistence of, and I'm not sure who's in your network. So it sounds like you're in housing and homelessness space, or transitional housing space, from what I recall. It's who else is doing transitional housing work? Where are the conversations about this issue? Are there working groups working on different aspects of this issue that you can join? Even if you can just find one provider. So for example, in New York City, the way the shelter system works, we have all these nonprofit providers that set up and get contracts to run a shelter. So let's say I'm a new provider. Maybe Adams Homes has been doing this for 10 years and I'm able to just connect with their CEO and to say, hey, I'm looking to do this in a similar space. Can I talk to you? Who else would you recommend that I speak to? Now, here's the thing that makes this tricky, and this is where systems of oppression and all sorts of other things come into play. Nonprofits will fight for money because we don't believe that there is enough to go around. We are told that there is a scarcity. And so sometimes you will run into challenges with other leaders who are hesitant because it's like, well, if I give it to you, then that's less for me. And that's not necessarily the case. But if you run into those people, you thank them and you keep it moving. But there are people who do believe in helping other people move ahead. I think a cohort like this is a great start. Finding other such cohorts. So, for example, we have the Power Fund in New York. Unfortunately, it's only for New York leaders. But these are the types of issues that people in that cohort will deal with. And it's a large cohort of CEOs and people that we're trying to invest in. So asking whoever runs this, are there other cohorts or leadership opportunities that I can connect with that maybe have a larger audience and I can meet more people? And it will take persistence, right? It will take persistence. I think with the using of the personal resources, and this is something with all my 25 side projects that I've kind of let go, is finding as much stuff as possible for free to the greatest extent possible. Because what I don't want for you is that you exhaust everything you have, you don't get the funding, and you burn out completely. And what you have is a good vision that now doesn't get realized. And so how do we pace ourselves between the delay in the taking off of what we're trying to do, with needing to sort of do everything because we feel like we want to see it happen right now? And so how do you create some space within that if it takes you time, that's okay. But what I don't want to happen to you is that it takes you time and you're depleted. Because I think that that's a very difficult place to get out of. And we see it happen. People do it all the time, right? We want to invest in our vision. Maybe some of those resources go to a class on, different aspects of the nonprofit management business where you can make more connections. Are there things in places like Udemy or Coursera that are inexpensive, but where other people will probably be in a large group in conversation that you can try to connect with and learn from? I think that the fiscal sponsorship is also something we talked about, right? So is there another organization that maybe will partner with you until you get yourself up and running? Someone that's aligned, maybe they're not doing the exact same thing, but they can get resources for you and help steward those resources for you to build your idea. But I think it's all those things, and it's being persistent and making sure that you're sticking to whatever the plan was that you have for the vision. But it sounds like what you're doing is really amazing. I don't want you to burn out, and burn through all of your own resources trying to do it. And I say this I think as a black woman, we be saving everybody, right? Like we have this thing where when there's a problem and we have identified that there is a problem, well, child, move out the way because we are coming. And by hook or by crook, it becomes a part of our breathing, our existence, right? Because we have this natural strength and nurturing ability, and we want to solve something that is causing a pain to people who look like me. And it is very easy to fall into the trap of burning through your own resources and then putting yourself to a detriment where you're not even able to do the thing. And now you yourself are going to get the services because, and I've seen it happen. You starting a food pantry out of your kitchen, and next thing you know, you at the food pantry, right? Because you were so committed to solving this thing, and you didn't.
That's real.
There's a scripture that talks about this, right? You got to count the costs And sometimes
Yes.
when you are counting the cost, you got to have the patience and you got to be able to delay the gratification of the success while you go
Mm-hmm.
through the dry season of trying to find your way forward.
Through. Right.
Tina, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Thank you for that.
Tina, I appreciate Lori just straight up if she takes on mentees. Um, I would like to be your West Coast if you don't mind. I do know a lot of people in this space and I would be happy to make introductions, but everything that Lori said, absolutely. I think the lowest hanging fruit is who's doing this work. How can you go into partnership with them? How can you maybe diversify their offerings and go into a granting opportunity together? How
Okay.
can you? And I know I love what Lori said about oh, she's coming back. You're back. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Setting realistic expectations and road mapping. We might not want to fulfill our dreams immediately. We might need to take a detour. But
Mm.
coming back to home base and what fuels you. I've never told anybody about my dream for a nonprofit. And I was telling Lori, I was like, these individuals are superheroes to me. Like, I'm your biggest fan. I have not been brave enough to step out into the work that you're doing. Now I can fundraise, but I think a lot of it is, am I the right person to do the work, and really working around what is that imposter syndrome. And I think Lori's revelation in sharing it with me was a revelation to myself. So, I just think that the preservation of self and also the belief is really, really important as you build these relationships. Um, and that's how I entered this relationship with Lori, as a grantee, with the grantor, just genuinely passionate and humble in seeking, and really
Mm-hmm.
uh, Lori is a unique partner in that not a lot of organizations want to give you capacity building and infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
and data, but she's a unicorn in this world, and I'm grateful. But you will find your unicorn. You will. And it will give you the confidence, like Lori has given me the confidence to have like complete boldness and be able to walk into a room and say, listen, you know, listen, I have a lot to say, and write a check. So having that authority, because each one of you do, um, once you get, your stuff in order, you're going to be unstoppable. But it is taking the work, taking the time. So I'd love to speak with you, Tina. We haven't had a chance to speak, so we'll talk.
Okay. Thank
Sorry, I
you.
don't want to be the last words. I wanted Alkeisha to say something, but we haven't heard from her. Maybe she will. Oh, okay. Jermaine said he's dead. Well, I hear you. I hear you. Lori, anything else? Last, I know we wanted to do a hard stop at 2:30. Is it 2:30 your time? She's on the East Coast, folks.
Yes. So
Did you want me to share
yes.
your contact information? How do you
Um,
want us to connect with you?
it's you can share my email if people want to email me. Sorry, I need to take a train, so I was looking at my train schedule. So I have to get to Queens, but you can share my email. Jermaine is making me laugh with his comments. So Jermaine was the first person on the call, and I don't know how we got to this place, but we're talking about my bio, and I think I said something like, I'm funny. And Jermaine was like, right. And I said, they teach you to kind of like, you write these bios, and that's an old bio. Like, it won't look like that in a couple of weeks. But I was like, the first line is just going to be, I'm funny, because um, so much of this is about being able to laugh and kind of enjoy yourself in the process of learning. So Thank you for dying, Jermaine. I appreciate you. Um, this was a really great conversation. People are free to email me. I hope it was helpful. Appreciate everyone's comments and questions. Grateful for the opportunity and excited for all of the really good work and visions that everyone has for what they've started, and curious to see sort of where it goes. So I think that I'm looking forward to the updates. Isla has my email, so she can share that with the group. And that's all I got. That's all I got for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lori. I think that you are officially a part of the Level Up family. And we're looking forward to giving you some updates. We will definitely follow up with you. Definitely. And we also want to hear more about this narrative change work, which is so compelling. Especially would love to see what the work around redlining and the information that you received about San Francisco. That would be great. So thank you. Jermaine, any last words as our official host? Thank you for letting me step in today.
It is all good. One, again, just thankful for your presence today, Lori, and all your insight. So encouraged. So yeah, I won't add anything to that. I think we've touched on a lot of things throughout the cohort, and more things will be coming. But yeah, just super grateful for you coming and sharing, tricking us, being honest, being authentic, sharing about all the projects you have on the side too. Yeah, just being yourself. That was super key, because we definitely, when we think of funders, we think of philanthropy, we think of money, we think of old white men, right? Stuck at the microphone. We don't know what to say to these people. We need to have a face. We need to have, something to change that idea about all that. So thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Great. Well, till next time. I think the next time is the culmination ceremony. Lori, I wish you could come out and break bread with us. Next time. I'll get on your calendar. I'll get on your
All right.
calendar.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. And good luck.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one. Yes, yes.